Eisenhower coach Jim Penley, you're Thursday, week one of fall camp, getting set for the 2024 season. What have you seen from your squad so far?
I'll be honest with you. We've had a lot of work to do. We've lost some really good ball players the last 2-3 years. But at the same time, we have a smaller roster, but the quality of the roster we have, I'll take them in any game. I've told people, small school football, sometimes you're not going to have a 30-man roster. This year, we're at 21, but I like all 21 of them. They're hard workers. You come to one of our practices, man, we're pumping plays out the entire time, and they're working their tails off, and we have some work to do, but we've definitely got the talent, I think, to go out there and compete, and hopefully first scrimmage will be a tough scrimmage. We got tremendous first game against Reynolds, and we're going to figure out where we're at.
You mentioned the roster size and losing some talented players over the past couple of years, but as a small school coach, and you've been doing this a long time, how do you go? How does that impact your off-season preparation? Or by this point, do you have something kind of, hey, I know every so often we're going to lose some guys, and this is how we're going to handle it?
The first thing we look at is last year we knew where we were going to be at this year. So last year, if we've got guys that aren't getting a lot of time in a particular position, we're starting to train them for the following year. We already knew we were going to have to make little tweaks and adjustments. We get into the off season, we look at what we expect to have for a roster, what we could have, and we get into camp, and we know who we got here now. And when you do that, you start going, okay, well, if this happens, this guy's going to have to move to this position. If this happens, so like right now, I got a couple guys that are dual or triple training, different positions, which is tough on them, I know. But, again, I tell them that's the reality of small school football. And if you learn those positions, dude, you're guaranteeing you're going to be on the field all the time,
How flexible do you have to be as a staff when it comes to running offensive systems? For example, a couple of years ago you had Owen Trumbull at quarterback, and you go to a guy like Sean Pascuzzi. There's just a little bit different players. How flexible do you have to be in your scheming to make it work for everybody?
Well, I think you always have to be flexible with the talent. If you come in and say, well, this is what we do, then you can try to put a square peg in a round hole. I think one of the things that's always been good for us is we run basically the same, 10 plays, but we use a lot of different formations, we use a lot of motions, so we can take plays and create something that looks like a new play out of just running, something from a different formation or a different motion set. And I think the good thing is all the guys know those plays. Like, we just drill the rules. And so now those rules, they apply no matter what defense we get, no matter what offense we got. Those rules always stay the same.
So, especially at a small school level, we hear all the time, games are won in the trenches, but, especially at a small school level, how important is it for you to have offensive, defensive linemen that are able to gel and build that chemistry quickly from year to year, and then, like you said, understand what those rules are and understand their assignments?
Well, it's unbelievably important, and I think almost every coach on our staff has played offensive line or defensive line pretty exclusively. And so, we're pretty tough on our linemen, and I think we understand that that's what you have to do to succeed and win, and I think that's where we've had success, over the years. So for us, we let them know on day one, communication is key. You got to be able to talk, you got to be able to communicate with each other, you got to be able to adjust. And at the end of the day, that really is our focus. If we've got to move a guy from the backfield, why be a second teamer when you can be starting for me? And we've done that for years. This year, honestly, we have a lot of linemen. We've got a lot more size than we ordinarily do. And we have a very athletic center at this point who could be a back, but he's playing on the line for the second year. So, but that line play, whether it be on the D line or the offensive line, is huge.
And you mentioned you got a lot of beef up front this year on your offensive line, and how can you use that to your advantage throughout the season as you go on, and not something that a lot of smaller schools have in that luxury.
Well, not something we ordinarily have. But if beef is as good as what it can do, and right now we've been working our schemes. If you can run a scheme with a smaller line and be effective, it can be devastating with a huge line. Because size is just something that you don't just create it, especially up front. If you can get people to be moved out of the way, that's the biggest part of the entire game. And I think with our group right now, they've really the last 2 weeks have been working really hard. They know what the expectations are. When you've got a big line that's mostly seniors, we expect them to carry the team. And if they do that with the really talented underclassmen that we have on the skill levels, we feel really good that we can go out and compete. Now, what happens from there? We got a tough schedule, man. We play a lot of schools that are definitely bigger than us. But the biggest thing we can do is make sure we go out and compete every week. And if we do that and we're good enough, then hopefully it ends up in a good result.
Speaking of expectations, you're got to break in a new quarterback again this year, replacing a region co-player of the year in Sean Pascuzzi. Now Jacob's actually going to step in. And what have you seen from your quarterback so far through camp?
I would say that we've been pretty blessed to have a lot of good quarterbacks. I also think that we do a really good job of trying to train up quarterbacks to be able to, be the player in the offense that we want. We want a guy who can, throw the ball well, manage the team, but also be able to run the ball well. And Caleb is the exact same type of ball player. I think he has really come in. He's a smart kid. He understands with a really good football IQ how the game operates, so he's always asking questions. He's always presenting ideas on things that we can do, which for a junior and a quarterback who hasn't started yet, that's awesome to see. And I think I'm excited to see how he develops as the year goes on.
You mentioned it earlier. You're going to have a very familiar opponent, Reynolds, coming up here in Week 1. This is a team, obviously, you've seen in the playoffs every year for the past 5 or 6 seasons. How different is it going to be to see them in Week 1 as opposed to in a District 10 playoff match?
Well, obviously Reynolds. We have nothing but respect for Reynolds. Like I said, I think in the coaching universe, I like to count Coach Mull as a pretty good friend. And I actually think that makes it more enjoyable when you compete. I feel that way with Liberty out at Cambridge Springs and a bunch of these other guys. But I knew when we had an opportunity to get them early in the season, I want that game because you are going to be tested. Reynolds is going to come in and they are just going to punch us in the mouth. And I would rather know exactly where I'm at the beginning of the year. And we've generally done that most of the time that I've been here, the head coach. We've had the Sharpsvilles and these guys that we've had as Week 1 games. And Reynolds is no different. They're a tremendous program. Their players are hard-nosed, and they play just phenomenal, sound football. That's why we had them in scrimmages the last 2 years. We wanted to know where we were at, and they're the best team. And still, even, I know Cambridge Springs had a great season last year, but when you look at, those programs, Reynolds is right there with Cambridge Springs. And it doesn't matter, if they had a down year last year, I know that those guys are going to have them ready for that first game, and we know we're going to get tested.
Talking about tough teams in Single A, you're going to have a newcomer this year. Wilmington drops down to Single A. How much an impact do you think does that change the landscape for you here in 1A in District 10?
Well, Wilmington is just like every one of those Mercer County teams out of Sharon. They're like the Sharpsvilles and the Farrells and the Hickories and the Sharons and the even back when West Middlesex was there. They're just such good football teams. And I know that their coach down there, he comes from a good coaching background, and he's done an amazing job. Obviously, Coach Frelly was there forever, and that's just that program is a football program. And we know going to when we go into the playoffs this year, when you add a team like that, at the same time, it's the playoffs. You expect to get amazing football, and it's going to be interesting to see, when they come down, how everyone else adjusts to them. Because, like I said, that is a knowledgeable, smart, smash-mouth football team that just plays good football.
So you mentioned you got your scrimmage coming up this week, and then a week later you're right into it in Week 1. What are you looking forward to from your team as you get the season underway?
The biggest thing is I want to see them come out and compete. The biggest thing that you can do as a football team, like I say, we want to run the ball well, we want to throw the ball well. If we don't come out and compete on every single play, on every single level, whether it be on offense or defense, you're not going to get to where we want to be, which is back at that district championship. And so the biggest thing that I want to see is what kind of a competition level do you bring to the field? And we know in the scrimmage we're going to get competition. We know in Week 1 with Reynolds, they're just going to show up and want to just pop us. So I want to see how we compete. And I think the scrimmage and that first game in particular are going to really give us an idea of the direction that we're going to be heading this season.
You mentioned wanting to get back to that District 10 championship game. Literally within an eyelash a year ago, getting right back to there. How much does a season like that, ending the way it ended, kind of drive you, motivate your team throughout the offseason?
I would say this: if you can be in that type of game, as amazing as that game was, I think for both teams, it was just a great game. If that doesn't build the competitive juice inside of you, then I don't totally know that you really love playing the game. And I know for me and our staff, and I know a number of our ball players, like they know just how close they were last year to pulling that huge upset over Cambridge Springs. And we definitely want to get back into that conversation. We know when we get to the playoffs, there's no guarantees. You'd be undefeated. Everyone's 0-0 coming to the playoffs. And we know every team that's there deserves to be there, and they're going to give you their best. So for us, our biggest thing is to compete, and we got to get to that dance. When we get to that dance, then we'll see what happens. But our goal ultimately is to get to that district title game.
All right, Coach. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yep.